Welcome everybody to Real to Real. Today we are reviewing Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. I'm Dean Val here with Dean Kevin, and so I'm going to give it over to Kevin to start us off. Welcome.
Defending Your Life is a 1991 American romantic comedy fantasy film about a man who finds himself on a trial in the afterlife, where proceedings examine his lifelong fears to determine whether he'll be, yet again, reincarnated on Earth. Written, directed, and starring Albert Brooks. The film also stars Meryl Streep, Rip Torn, Lee Grant, and Buck Henry. Los Angeles advertising executive Daniel Miller dies in a car accident on his 39th birthday and is sent to Judgment City, a purgatory-like waiting area populated by the recently deceased, where he will have his life on Earth judged. Daniel and the rest of the departed are offered many Earth-like amenities and activities while they undergo their judgment processes. From delicious, calorie-free, all-you-can-eat buffets to bowling alleys and comedy clubs. Daniel's defense attorney, Bob Diamond, explains that people from Earth use so little of their brains, only 3 to 5%, and that they spend most of their lives functioning based on their fears. When you use more than 5% of your brain, you don't want to be on Earth, believe me, says Diamond. If the court determines that Daniel has conquered his fears, he will be sent on to the next phase of existence, where he will be able to use more of his brain and thus be able to experience more of what the universe has to offer. Otherwise, his soul will be reincarnated on Earth to live another life in another attempt at moving past his fears. At Daniel's tribunal, presided over by 2 judges, Diamond argues that Daniel should move on to the next phase, but his formidable opponent, Lena Foster, taking the opposing argument. Each utilizes video-like footage from select days in Daniel's life to make their case to the judges. During the procedure, Daniel meets and falls in love with Julia, a recently deceased woman who lives a seemingly perfect life of courage and generosity, especially compared to his. Meanwhile, things do not go well for Daniel. Foster shows a series of episodes in which Daniel did not overcome his fears, as well as various other bad decisions and mishaps, while Diamond vigorously attempts to portray Daniel's actions more positively. Following each day's proceedings, Daniel and Julia spend time exploring Judgment City. On the last day of the hearing, Foster plays footage of Daniel's previous night with Julia, in which he declines to spend the night with her, despite his strong feelings for her. Foster believes this clearly underscores Daniel's fear and lack of courage. It is ruled that Daniel will return to Earth, while Julia is judged worthy to move on. Before saying goodbye, Diamond comforts Daniel with the knowledge that the court is not infallible, and just because Foster won it doesn't mean she's right. Daniel remains disappointed. Daniel boards a tram, poised to return to Earth, when he spots Julia on a different tram. He impulsively unstraps himself, leaps from the moving tram, dodges traffic, and suffers electric shocks and injury to get to Julia. Unable to enter her tram, he clings precariously to the outside of the moving vehicle, banging on the door and trying to pry it open. The scene pulls back to show the entire event is being watched by Diamond, Foster, and the judges in the chamber where Daniel's hearing took place. Diamond remarks to Foster, "Brave enough for you," who slightly smiles at him. One of the judges sends a message, ordering the tram doors opened. Daniel and Julia are reunited, applauded by the other passengers, and embrace as they are allowed to move on to the next phase of existence together. The cast were as follows: Albert Brooks as Daniel Miller, Meryl Streep as Julia, Rip Torn as Bob Diamond, Lee Grant as Lena Foster, Buck Henry as Dick Stanley, Daniel's substitute attorney, George D. Wallace as Daniel's judge, Lillian Layman as Daniel's judge, S. Scott Bullock as Daniel's father, Carol Bivins as Daniel's mother, Susan Walters as Daniel's wife, Gary Beach as a car salesman. Shirley MacLaine has a cameo appearance as the holographic host of the Past Lives Pavilion, a reference to her publicly known belief in reincarnation.
Well, thank you. That was, yeah, that's the gist of the movie. I appreciate that it wasn't high tech like some of these other movies that we see these days. It was pretty low tech, except for the surveillance. You know, they're watching everything, and they have that ability to bring imagery of past lives and present and that into to play because they're judging him, so-called judging him. But it was refreshing in a way because it was so simplistic, and some of the ideas we'll talk about. What they portray here as the afterlife was very interesting. So go ahead, Kevin. Thank you.
And so we are introduced to the main character of the movie, Daniel. What we have is an individual who is, like the vast masses and majority of humanity are, rather an oblivious person, blissfully unaware and content in his unconsciousness, self-convinced about what he thinks life is and what it entails, whatever that might be for him. Not very difficult to determine, as humanity have been marketed into a consideration, an acceptance, agreement of a literal social consciousness that has been provided by that which wants to retain humanity in the controlled situation that it is. The world controllers, those that have this simulated creation on lockdown, and a simulation overall that effects according to their design. As the consciousness overall affects the simulator, as the consciousness mechanics is the generator of simulated experience, so to have the simulated experience of, say, a species, or indeed an entire simulator under your control, you rather have to garner agreement that this be so. The consciousness then programmed with such agreement, through the various ways it is secured, fear, intimidation, marketed benefit on the surface that is anything but, and this has the corresponding simulated situation, that of a simulated creation under the domination of a controlling species, the reptilians, and a control that extends to the earth and humanity, 100% human farming planet such as it is. And of course agreements then must be maintained that the controllers' positions of control are perpetuated, as absent of that agreement from the consciousness as the generator of the specific agreement ideas, and the controllers no longer have the simulated creation of a design that suits their controlling inclinations. So with the control established, as the agreement to it is programmed over lifetimes of agreement, and is retained in the subconscious, now is the necessity to keep humanity agreeable to that which the controllers create. The world is based on their systems, their ideas therefore, with the intentionality of control behind the surface appearance of things. And so, not only is control agreement already locked in through the subconscious, but is generally consciously embraced also. And regardless of a conscious rebellion, the subconscious agreements retain the individuals as slaves, projecting them continuously into positions of control, as these subconscious agreements are retained. The only way to escape a situation of being controlled is to shift agreement from a consciousness that is based on agreement to control, and then, although the effects of what has up until now been decided must still play out, the individual is beyond being resigned to a process of constant life reincarnational cycles, lifetimes always based on the foundations of agreement to control, and perpetual subjugation by the controllers that this agreement is extended to. And so the controllers have a solid foundation for their control of the simulation, the subconscious agreements overall, and now is the trick to keep everyone focused one-dimensionally, that they won't become aware of more than the surface literal physical simulation, which if they did could lead on to an awareness and a deciding to step beyond the agreement of the consciousness and then the dark forces begin to lose their foundational agreement base, and so market the humans into the considerations of what life is all about, according to the controllers, according to their designed human social consciousness. Get a job, get a family, get a career, make lots of money, be socially acceptable, chase ever escalating positions of prestige and fortune. Nothing wrong with any of these things, but they will not only keep you the effects and therefore in creation, but with the foundation subconscious agreements to control underpinning your simulated experience. You will chase and acquire these things, but always within the confines of the dark forces prison yard. So here we have Daniel, a typical human, who has bought into the dark forces marketing of what life is all about. He has his career, he has his expensive car, he is locked into the effects of himself, of his consciousness, with no consideration or awareness of anything beyond the one-dimensional physical level. He is just what the controllers want every human to be, a completely self-convinced, self-limited, and unconscious slave, and a contribution through agreements subconsciously and with many, and including Daniel, also consciously, to the maintaining of the controlling positions the dark forces seek to perpetuate. But then driving his car and not paying attention to the road, rather symbolic, as most are asleep at the wheel, just unconsciously drifting through the effects they have created on automatic pilot, with the Barbara Streisand song playing, with her singing of how something's coming, and indeed it was, as Daniel drives into the bus and destroys his physical body vehicle. Rather a shock and surprise for Daniel, who had considered nothing beyond the physical life level, and suddenly the physical level is gone, and he transitions. The awareness that he is, that which animates through his created physical vehicles, lifetime to lifetime, now moves automatically to the next position. And the position this would be for most would be the astral, the next position in dimensional, literal terms. That although we have 5 body vehicles, that each effect 5 corresponding dimensional life levels, when our awareness vacates the physical vehicle, we will be positioned where our recognition will allow. For only if we are aware of the other life level positions can we be positioned there, although in reality we are everywhere simultaneously, but the view we have is according to what we are aware of and decide to be. You can't go to a forest, for example, if you are not aware there is a forest there, as the decision to do so is paramount primarily, the intent to want to be there, that sets the potentiality for it to be so, as our experience always is what we decide. But then even should we know of the other life levels, if we are very much attached to the lower levels, which most individuals are, the physical, astral, then attachment, focus, attention, is still decision that affects our experience and positioning with life. So, to position yourself anywhere, you need firstly be aware of all the positions available, and then to have nothing that prevents your ability of positioning anywhere you choose. Nothing that anchors you and prevents you from full simulator access. And then beyond that, into the real universes, universal positioning, the awareness of the real awareness, the recognition of the isness that this real awareness is, and the releasing of all tap lines that not only bind you to a creation, but bind you to certain parts of it, that you can recognize and see how to be anywhere you want. And indeed, positioning as the real awareness isness that we are, has us in a position of everything, beyond the simulation of restriction, with its experiential positioning of view that is limited to a certain vehicle or life level. And most humans, most individuals throughout creation, in fact, will be physical, astral. That's as far as their awareness then goes. Their awareness generally not extending beyond the physical, in fact, but dropping the physical vehicle, the awareness must occupy the next position, dimensionally speaking, and that is the astral being the vehicle of sensations, and a life level most won't position beyond, as generally that which individuals chase endlessly through a creation and lifetimes is based on emotional stimulation through the astral vehicle. And so it is with individuals with no awareness of the levels of life, the other aspects of the self beyond the physical. So will it be somewhat a surprise and shock when they transition, as they won't know where they are. They won't have anything to relate to. They will be bewildered, baffled, drift around aimlessly, and then return to another physical level lifetime. Their future lifetime already awaiting them, as it is for all the unconscious, unaware. For as we continue to create idea causes, we continue to project the simulated effects, which span the lifetime we are in, and when the decided moment of demise comes around, and we transition, the effects we haven't yet experienced have laid out simulation yet to be faced, and that would be future lifetimes. For this is what we have decided. We create causes. We create and chase ideas. We have the corresponding effects. And always remember the mighty subconscious part of the consciousness, our foundation of experience, based on agreement to control, that always will endlessly effect controlled experience with the additional conscious ideas we chase, create, and agree to thrown in. So we are stuck in cycles of reincarnation until we step out of the consciousness that affects them and choose to be more than just experiencing simulation. And so, individuals can drift around the astral as long as they like, as the deciders of their experience. Baffled, bewildered, not knowing where they are, then return to what they know, physical level encasement. Their awareness returns to the simulated effects awaiting them through their programmed consciousness. And in the movie, we see the droves of the recently transitioned looking just as bewildered as you might expect for the unconscious unaware as they are trundled around in wheelchairs.
Yeah, they're disoriented. I wonder why. The place looks just like Earth, except for free perks. But yeah, it takes a while for them somehow to orient themselves to this new place in creation. He had his own room to rest and take naps and get ready for his judgment day, his hearing. But it's just interesting how, and we see this too, how your awareness, basically you're aware wherever you are, you keep your awareness. So he still had his awareness, but um, it was a different environment. But his awareness didn't change with that. So he was aware of what he was aware of, which was again one-dimensional. And it's interesting how they market this 5% use of your brain, you'll go on. That sounds like a little funny, like, yeah, the more literal you are, the more trapped or more tap line you will be as you move on to these different levels. Will tap line you even more. It looked like a gladiator stadium almost, like this, people watching these people that have been um, lost their physical body, and then they watch them to see what they do. And when he went on the bus, when he took the risk to follow Julia, they applauded him, and his lawyer gave him a thumbs up that see, he's not, he got rid of some of his fear. He's qualified himself to go on. That's like basically where I saw the only place in the movie where he took a risk to do something outside of the controllers. And it's like when two enemies meet, and one of the captured ones, shows bravery in some way. I mean, the controllers like that. They don't want these passive. They're boring passive people that just follow along with things. So it's exciting to them too, for the controllers, to see someone brave to step up. It's a challenge for them because they're tired of just having people following them around. So it's a challenge for them to confront the rebels, and like Daniel did here. They plotted him and had to move on. But so this is like, almost like human farming. Remind me too, human farming, like the cattle trains, these trams bringing people along, and they're all in these togas or smocks, all dressed the same, just ready to be processed. You could say, judged, processed. And so Albert Brooks wrote this. Interesting where he got this. Well, I think it's the part I think he got right, you could say, was that disoriented part where you find yourself in another environment, totally different, and it takes a while to orient yourself. And then there are others maybe that come to your aid to, like we saw in What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, and his sidekick came to give him some hints like how to navigate the new place he was in. So that part I see is, is good.
The simulation extends then beyond transition, as individuals cling to the personal self consciousness and experience then the astral level that effects from the next body vehicle. But the programming of the consciousness dictates the simulation beyond the physical also. We see and experience what we decide, and the controllers have certainly marketed the ideas of heaven very prolifically. And even though individuals may perhaps not consider consciously their next position on transition, the subconscious retains agreements of lifetimes of ideas of heavens through the various created reptilian religions that have been a part of the control and restriction of humanity since day one of the human species. So individuals generally will find themselves in what looks like the heavens they have agreed to, consciously or unconsciously through the subconscious, and placed in designated heavens. The dark forces that rule creation through the agreements they have this control extended through the life levels of it, as agreement is, of course, through all aspects of the personal self, so plays out accordingly as controlled life levels, and with reptilian beings positioned as the overseers of each. And yes, these reptilian overlords will pose as gods, for indeed they are every god that any religion has ever made mention of, and it is these very reptilian life-level overlords that the various religious texts and books refer to when they speak of gods. Again, all agreement, therefore, that is maintaining the reptilian control of the simulator, that is channeled and culminates to agreement overall to these life-level gods of man, as all control stems from them throughout creation and the designated heavens they lord over, and all the various attendants that are assisting those that have transitioned in the movie are very likely minions of the various life-level gods, or just other bewildered unconscious beings who decide to assume such a position and capacity, as we can be whatever we want in creation. Perhaps some of the attendants are even guides, operating amidst the unconscious unaware as they do, as the guides walk unseen through creation until recognized, agreed to, and allowed to then feature in the simulation of the agreeable individual. As the guides look for any hint or spark of risk-taking, of anyone that gives indication of wanting to be more than just the effects of their consciousness. But of course, will be the various individuals deployed to keep us in creation, to keep us as agreement cogs in the machine of reptilian simulator design. We will undoubtedly meet with friends and family who had transitioned also, keeping those emotional attachments alive. Attachments that, like any ideas agreed and clung to, ensure the effects follow. For with attachments to others, we have decided to experience the idea simulation of a being, an attachment to the body vehicle, and created a personality, and the only way such can be experienced, as with any idea, is of course in the creational body worlds. And in the movie they would present to the transitioned that which they can relate to. Games of golf, eat whatever you want, etc. Keep the distractions going, the focus on simulation, the chasing of ideas. And with any individuals who do boast talents or skills, very often these are utilized by the reptilian life-level gods, generally for the maintaining of control throughout creation, as of course anything occurring astrally does impact the physical life level, as everything rather flows from the ethereal down through to the physical. The physical is the dumping ground. It's rather amusing that showers are offered and that the recently transitioned are tired in the movie. For beyond the physical vehicle, everything is rather by imagination, and only that which we cling to we recreate on the other dimensions and life levels. But of course, individuals with no awareness beyond the physical will take their assumptions with them. They will cling to what they know, and the decided limitations of the physical. They may assume they will be tired, or need a shower, and for them this then is their experience. Most will maintain the body forms they had on the physical, as most are attached to them and identify as their body vehicles, whereas, having dropped the physical vehicle, in reality they are not resigned to any form. It was amusing how the elderly lady speaking to Daniel maintained her physical frail form and also maintained her cognitive abilities, that had evidently somewhat diminished as her physical level vehicle had aged. But now she would be beyond the limitations of the physical body and its mental capacities, as whatever the functioning state of her mind, just like an old computer, she had now vacated. And although she still would be burdened by her consciousness, and however that was constructed, she wouldn't have a dilapidated physical vehicle computer to operate with. But again, oblivious as she and all in the movie were, she would have clung on to her identity, and the way she was, the state of her operating computer system, and rather retained then not only her physical body form as it had been, but her mental acuity as it was on the physical. And indeed, the Calorm god and the various life-level gods and reptilian minions are not about to tell anyone that they are limitless in actuality, in regards to their body forms and what they can do, as everything is more so by imagination beyond the physical, and you are only as restricted and limited as you decide to be once you move beyond the physical vehicle. And even on the physical, should one learn to bypass the consciousness of agreed-to restriction, of physical laws, of distance and time, can one operate with the same degree of freedom that they can on the astral and other life levels. As an example, in the movie, it was generally determined you could eat what you wanted and never put on weight. But should you decide that eating will result in weight gain, this would be your astral experience.
Yeah, eat what you want. It's uh, kind of promoting, you can have what you want, which you can, but under their tutelage, basically. It was almost like he was interviewing for a job, during the hearing and stuff, like interviewing for a new job. Although he's going to the next level supposedly, but very, very Earth-like, everything there. And yes, your intent here in the physical carries over. So we know about Dwayne's daughter, who's Helen Fry in a former life, who wanted to be the daughter of Dwayne and his wife, and she did come back. Just by that one intent, she did come into this life, present life, as Dwayne's daughter from a previous intent she had in a past life, which was just not too long ago. So those intents, those desires, they follow us, or we follow them, and as long as they're there, we're usually not going to become more aware until we decide to get beyond those desires. We can still have them, but get beyond them by deciding to become more aware of what else is going on besides our desires and interests and feelings and things like that. So, and then yeah, the fear-based thing in the movie. Basically, you move on when you get rid of your fear, and that's, yeah, the creation is about fear. It's fear-based totally here. Fear of losing your job, fear of losing your life, your physical body life. Everything's everything comes down to like fear unless you become more aware and see it for what it is. It is about survival, but you don't need. There's no fear in the real universe. It's just an isness. So this fear is kind of creational based, and again they're promoting that in this movie, which is okay, but we just see it for what it is. They're doing it to keep people here, basically to keep them farmed and recycled. And this shows very well, the movie, how people are recycled. And who knows what this moving on means, And they do mention God once, I think, and it's an unknown. He just pointed up or something, or like it's an unknown. But yeah, mystery, like they usually do. But actually, the is recognizable. it's not really an unknown. It's just that we're unaware of it. It's just a matter of recognizing what it is, what this reality is.
Mr. Diamond, one of the characters that seemed in charge, did rather present as though he could be one of the reptilian life-level gods. Apparently, the idea presented in the movie was that you couldn't advance your position unless you had conquered your fears, or back to physical level incarnation you would go. To position yourself in higher, literally speaking, life levels, you do need to move beyond that which restricts such progression of positioning, unshackling yourself from the focus and basically decision to be resigned to the astral. But then individuals throughout their creational lifetimes will move up and down the scale, positioning from astral to etheric, but unless they decide to recognize the ears and that which they really are, the real awareness beyond the simulation, then they are overall resigned to a creation, and the real purpose is to learn to recognize the superseding of creation's necessity. In the movie, it was rather suggested that intellect allows for progression, whereas in actuality, intellect, just like any aspect of the personal self, is just a vehicle. And although variation of the vehicles, how they are created and developed, will affect experience in accordance, this still won't get you an inch out of creation. And the mind, the intellect, is basically the effectiveness of your mental body computer, its capacity, its power and capability. And as much as you may have vastly superior alien beings in comparison to humans, intelligence-wise, they are still generally just as unaware, unconscious, and with their decided attitudes. So really, it's about awareness. Everything is awareness, and becoming more aware of the real awareness we and everything in fact is. That we become fully aware of first the real awareness, we become completely conscious of all that which the consciousness and creation comprises of, then are in a position where we are not unconsciously shackled to any idea, and indeed we then decide what of any idea we wish to experience, and that position of the completing of awareness has us at liberty to move through creation unhindered and unrestrained. And then the next step of deciding to recognize the ears, and positioning as this all aliveness, everything awareness we each are. So the movie does rather promote the notion of intellect and brain capacity being instrumental in advancement, which is a fallacy, as it's all about awareness, and that is aside from the mind and aspects of the personal self. The 5 bodies are only utilized as tools for the purposes of recognizing the ears through the comparisons that the experiences generated through them provide. and fear is that which the consciousness is comprised of predominantly. For a consciousness that is based on agreement to control, and consider the means by how that agreement has been secured over the eons, by intimidation, torture, and death, and so underlying everything is the fear of the consequences of defiance to the controllers, the fear of lack, the fear of not having enough, the consciousness programmed with the ideas of competition with others, even though there's room for everyone and their creations, the fear of being deprived, of not surviving, and the controllers more fearful than anyone, as their motivation for controlling others stems from a fear of not having what they want, so they subjugate others to ensure they have everything, and their fear is rather projected onto those they control. Overall, then, the consciousness, mainly the subconscious, is based on a foundation of fear, which has given rise to the being known as the Supreme Deceptor. And just like the influence is a manifestation of the consciousness, so this being is of the subconscious, and embodies then that which the subconscious comprises of, that of a fear. So fear, like any emotion really, like the consciousness in general, must be let go of. We must learn to be indifferent to it, that we can stand in the nowness of the real awareness, which we can't do if we sit in the idea creations of the personal self, of thought and emotion, as only from the nowness of the real awareness are we connected with the isness, and standing in that reality, and aside from the consciousness, a consciousness that if we remain in, we are agreeing with, and so are the effects of its construction. The idea being to only utilize the body vehicles when required, and not to sit in them, to be able to be detached from them, as the idea is to move into a position of being able to let the personal self go. A big decision to make, but one that must be made if one intends to be able to supersede the simulated creational realms. And the judges in the movie very much could represent the lords of karma, self-appointed individuals who have decided to administer the next positions for all who are set to return to the physical level, though really we are the deciders through our choices and idea agreements. So the lords of karma are only really telling us what we have decided for ourselves. And in the movie, the restaurants were able to produce their food instantaneously, as again, beyond the physical level, everything is instantly so, unless we decide otherwise. Every food item in the movie was delicious also, as this was what was decided and agreed upon. Certainly a happy little spot that would keep people content to remain in, and then a little marketing ploy whereby you have to return to the physical if the judges say so, whereas in reality you only go where and when you decide. But of course, if the tap lines haven't been released, although we are at liberty to return to the physical when we choose, we are resigned to the effects the tap line agreements have projected if we remain locked in and in agreement with the consciousness. Mr. Diamond would proclaim how there was no hell. In reality, there is, or a very close approximation to what we might imagine hell to be, which would be the lower astral, a position that on transition the most abrasive beings find themselves. Again, based on their decisions, have they found themselves thus positioned, and the lower astral realm is the effect extension of the kind of consciousness that effects it, as the other areas of the astral and mental worlds would be. Our experience is only as dark and dismal as our constructed consciousness projects it to be, as we experience that which we decide. And so, as you'd expect, the most twisted, dark, and ill-intended will find themselves positioned in the lower astral now, but won't realize this until they vacate the physical body on transition.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Not much was mentioned of good and evil and hell and heaven, really, except the mention of Los Angeles as being closer to hell than that's close, getting close there. Which, if you've ever been there, yes, the 405 freeway and just the smog and it's just it's close. Yes. Okay, and then well, the potential though, if we're only using 5% of our or 3%, 2% of our brain, I mean, it does show that we have potential, which is like cool, but because we do, not in a literal sense, well that too, but in a more awareness sense, there's so much potential. So that part was good. And most people were very dull when they on the tram. It kind of showed their awareness. It kind of symbolized or demonstrated their awareness. And yeah, they brought everything with them, basically, their body and their mind, but it demonstrated how lack of aware most people are. They're just kind of dull, in terms of what's going on. They're just following along, and they're just going along for the ride on the tram. They all look the same, all human formed. Julia was interesting. She's like the goody-goody person, kind of a smart. She did good works according to her past life, the visuals that they had. So she qualified to go on. But as we know, just being a nice person or a good person or doing good works doesn't necessarily mean anything except what it means, which is maybe you get some good karma. But in terms of becoming more aware and recognizing what's real, it doesn't really factor into that unless it's a reference for you to become more aware. But if it's just a reference, or just if you're just doing it to be a good person, to get along with people, uh, you'll find out it doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, people will take advantage of you, or you'll just see later on that it doesn't necessarily mean what you might think. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not about awareness. Everything is about awareness. So relate it to that, you'd be better off. And yeah, they do bring up the cause and effect factor, which on in the trial and all that. There's that batted around, which is very real. It's about cause and effect, everything here in creation. But we can utilize these things for a benefit by gathering our experiences and our doing our cause, seeing the effect, and through that maybe we can sneak a peek into what's really real. And that's what we're doing here on the show, is like helping people recognize what's real. It's a huge process, but it can be done. The real guides have done it.
And every lifetime is recorded, as Mr. Diamond would say, even though the mind mental vehicle is reconstituted and new each lifetime around, as it holds only the references of each lifetime's experiences. When the body vehicle expires, the files are rather transitioned to the causal memory body, an aspect of the personal self that is retained despite the body vehicle being replaced each lifetime around. These would be then referred to as the Akashic records, and are certainly perusable and able to be examined by anyone who operates on the causal level, and that dimensional life level falls under the Kalorm god's jurisdiction. So he certainly can access your Akashic lifetimes of references, even if you can't. He also decides if you will return to the physical, and he is not beyond imprisoning you in the astral dungeons if he thinks you are a troublemaker, someone that isn't supporting his control system, but rather undermining it. And although your next physical lifetime and vehicle awaits you, the next physical body constructed based on your consciousness and choices, you still rather need to get back there, and there can be delays. It's not an automatic, immediate thing. If the Kalorm doesn't imprison you, you may still be waiting in a long line to have the opportunity of a physical life again, as it is of course dependent on the availability. Procreation is required, etc. Negotiations made between the mother and the child-to-be on the unseen life levels. But ultimately we decide. Our decisions must shape our simulation, and so everything will roll out in accordance with the decision to reincarnate, if that is what we want. And so will there be the means of our astral prison escape, or the availability of a body vehicle made so. It's interesting how Mr. Diamond said that children don't need to be judged, because until there is agreement with the literal social consciousness, children, just like the animals, are still connected with the real awareness and operating aside from the consciousness in the nowness of their real awareness. That yes, children have the subconscious foundation agreement to controlled situations, as all in the simulator will, but until they step fully into the consciousness, as they will generally when indoctrinated into the schooling systems, they are not so limited. They are not in agreement with the consciousness, and very likely they may not be positioned in the designated heavens of man, should they transition at a young, pre-indoctrinated age, that are standing aside from the consciousness on a transition is that they are not resigned to the consciousness of programming and the lords of karma, and more likely the guides will place them according to what makes the most sense in regards to where they are in their process of awareness, as by virtue of the child not agreeing with the consciousness, so are they not restricted by it. And with animals, they will not go to the simulated heavens of man, because nowhere in their consciousness can there be any agreement to being positioned as such. Their awareness would return directly to the ears, though of course an awareness that doesn't as yet recognize the ears, hence the need for the animal body forms, and then the process of going through a creation and then progressing into the free will self-deciding body types for all the comparisons that allow for this recognition. So evidently, if children then bypass the designated heavens, they are not resigned to the marketing that takes place there, a continued marketing of all beings throughout the life levels. That agreement too results in the corresponding restriction, and regardless of what you do in creation, if you have not decided to move beyond the consciousness, then any idea you create and agree to will have you the effect of, and continually cycling in creation, regardless of the nature of the idea, be they noble ideas, decided choices of being good or evil, and although the effects mirror our choices, our life positions reflect the nature of our choices, any stance we take within the endless expressions of ideas that fall on either side of the polarity of creation will have us restricted in creation. So regardless of what the judges in the movie said to Daniel as to how he should have been, how he should have done this or that with his life, unless he decides to recognize his real awareness and the ease, then whatever he does are just personal self-choices that effect simulated experience. And as Daniel was shown his past lives, this would rather be the opportunity of objectivity, where his simulated experiences and a personal self are concerned, that to recognize and stand in the reality of our real awareness, we rather do need to be indifferent and objective to the personal self, to realize it is just simulation, that it isn't real, that it is just a vehicle for experience generating, and not what we really are. For if we decide we are the personal self, if we identify and are attached with the body forms, then this becomes our reality. And the idea is to compare simulation with what is real, not to sit in the simulation and make that our reality. But again, it's all a choice each individual makes.
Okay, thank you. Children don't have to be judged. Yeah, they really can't touch children. They can start indoctrinating them like they do here, but actually, because of their sincerity and awareness, purity, they can't touch them. Again, unless they start controlling and manipulating and indoctrinating them. But it's a good example. And yes, life sees everything. Life, everything's recorded. You could say that on a lower level, it's recorded, but life is now, so it sees everything now as it is. And we use the sun as a reference because that's a good way to if you have any questions, Dwayne talks about that as just, reference the sun for any questions you have about life. And just look beyond the sun, behind the sun, not just at the sun and what it's, but there's so much to it. It's just the sincerity that it has, no judgment. There's nothing that, no control. It's just, it's always on, it's always sincere and pure. And that's just a kind of a literal level, but the sun demonstrates this isness that just is all the time. It's now, it's real, it's dynamic. Uh, you can see how, in a way, this movie demonstrates the dullness of people, the boring life. I mean, their thrill was to eat, go to the dining hall to eat. So, what's that, life is a lot more. And that's why we're here. There's no other movie reviews like this. I've searched the internet for different people doing reviews, but there's nothing like this. So we're very unique because we bring out more references than these other people that are very literal in their reviews, and the ones that are spiritual or metaphysical, they only go a certain way, really. Some are it was kind of a whistleblower type. There's different ones, but there's no one like us out because we really do reference what is real, and we give people the opportunity to see how movies are documentaries, and they're showing us what they're doing, the controllers, and it makes it fun too. I mean, it's like these movies, some of which we watch, which may be Independence Day, if you want to do that next week, Kevin. It's exciting. There's action. We could be watching Leave It to Beaver. People getting up in the morning, having breakfast, go to work and stuff. But a lot of these movies are action packed. They have, uh, uh, people surviving, trying to survive, and using their creativity. So you see things you could use in your life to get out of tough situations, like James Bond does. So the writers are and especially these days in Netflix. Netflix has a lot of going on. There's current with what's going on with the world. We just saw something last night. Oh, it was with Liam Neeson. It was one of these plane. Forget the title, but it was a movie about basically taking over the plane, terrorists taking over the plane, and the idea that they're trying to subliminally implant in people is we don't have enough security, because these people took over Liam Neeson, who's the air marshal or the plane, and they were running circles around him. He couldn't figure out what was going on. And they had an experience, or one of them, where in 9/11, a family member was killed or something like that. So he was taking revenge and showing how the United States needed more security, um, beyond the uh, what they had with the Patriot Act and such, by getting on the plane and doing all this havoc. And eventually they were going to blow up the plane and parachute out. So of course he saved the day and got the girl. But these movies are a way to, if you're not in a religion or belief system, which is probably good, the movies are a good way to see what's going on. And if you can kind of weed through them and see what they're really trying to show you or trying to implant in you. And if not, just for what they're showing you, the end of the world is coming, all these movies, apocalyptic kind of movies, and Dune, and all these things that are happening, plus all the technology that's coming out and the sophisticated, well, sophisticated for us humans, but not for the reptilians and others. But it's all there in front of us. So that's why we do this show, and that's why we're here to help people wake up to more potential. Okay, Kevin, give it back to you. Thank you.
Only that how the movie ended, where he would forge his emotional attachment with the woman who I've completely forgotten who the name was, Meryl Streep,
Yeah,
and
Julia.
so that would basically shackle him to her with a tap line that would ensure that it would keep them embroiled in creation together into future lifetimes. And although again, it's everything's fine and people can choose whatever they want, when it comes to emotional attachments, when you want to become more aware, I mean, you really don't want to be shackling yourself to anybody who is one-dimensionally physical, astral based, unconscious and unconscious, because obviously if you're wishing to retain them in your experience, the only way you can do that is in simulation. And so when it comes to individuals moving through the process of creation, they really need to keep up with each other, because if one starts to fall behind and the other one wishes to, but they both wish to be retained in each other's experience, then the one who is at the forefront will have to diminish their own process to an extent in order to stay with them. And although that sounds a bit harsh, I mean, it's only simply what each individual is deciding. And if an individual you are in an affiliation or an association with only wants to go so far, you're not really doing yourself any favors by staying with them, because they're going to stay at that position anyway, and all you're doing is diminishing your own process. And so, but in the movie, with the two main individuals, you could see they were very much at a similar sort of stage of awareness, in that they generally were quite contented to remain creationally based. And so for them, that wouldn't really be an issue. But I said, for individuals who want to supersede the necessity of the simulator and not be restricted by it, you really do need to start addressing any emotional attachments you have with individuals and start severing those tap lines, because any perpetuated and maintained agreement to any idea, including the idea that the personal self and personality of an individual will be an effect you then have to experience as per the simulator's design. And if you so then attach with the idea of an individual, you have decided to experience that as simulation. And so the only place that can be done is in creation. And of course, in the movie, as in a lot of movies, it does promote the idea of emotional attachment. That seems to be the pinnacle of achievement,
in the simulators that you have all your friends and you have your emotional other and you have families, and then you skip through creation in love and bliss throughout all eternity. But again, that's all well and good, but you're not going to get an inch out of creation. And of course, when it comes to the love that they very heavily promote in the movies, that is just actually a sensation of the astral body anyway. And but people just label it as love and seem to put it at the forefront of human experience as though it's the ultimate thing to strive for. And again, if that's what people want, then that's what they can have. But anything created, including any sensations of the body, of the astral body, are effects you then have to experience. And so I will finish with that.
Great. And the way to untap line yourself is to sing the NUUU, and that's what we're going to do now, and end the show with the NUUU. And this is something you can sing throughout the day, before bed, and see what life shows you. NUUU. Kevin.
NUUU.
Okay, there it was.